The heart monitor's steady beep, beep is the only sound in the trauma suite until the rhythm suddenly breaks into a flat, piercing whine. Defibrillator. Charged to 200. Destiny shouts, her voice cutting through the clinical silence like a blade. She presses the paddles to the scarred chest of the man on the table. His body jolts. The line stays flat. Again, 300. Thump. The monitor hiccups, stumbles, then finds a slow, thudding cadence. Destiny exhales, her surgical mask fluttering with the breath. She reaches over to adjust his drip, her fingers trembling slightly from the adrenaline still flooding her system. 27 minutes. She had been working on this man for 27 minutes, and she still didn't know his name. Suddenly, a hand like a vice clamps around her wrist. Destiny gasps, looking down. The man's eyes are open, dark, bloodshot, and terrifyingly lucid for someone who was clinically dead 60 seconds ago. He pulls her down, forcing her ear inches from his lips. His voice is a sandpaper growl that scrapes the inside of her chest. "You should have let me go, doctor. I'm a nurse." Destiny snaps, trying to pull away. "And you were flatlining. Let go of me." His grip only tightens, tattooed fingers digging into her skin with a pressure that will leave marks. He looks past her to the glass doors of the ER, where 6 men in black suits have just stepped into the light, bowing in perfect, practiced unison toward the table. "You brought me back," he whispers, his gaze returning to hers with a focus so predatory it makes her stomach drop. "That means my heart beats on your time now, and I don't like being kept waiting." He releases her wrist, but the mark he leaves behind is a bruised promise. "Don't leave the building, Destiny. You're the only thing keeping me alive." A pause, slow and deliberate as a closing door. "And I'm a very selfish man." "Wait, did he just okay? I need you to stop what you're going right now, because you do not want to come into this story late. If you're new here, welcome to the most unhinged corner of the video. Hit that like button right now, because this story is about to ruin you in the best possible way. Subscribe if you want more romance, thriller, and morally questionable men who fall catastrophically in love. Notifications on, because part 2 will not wait for you. Okay, back to Destiny, because she has absolutely no idea what she just woke up. Destiny had worked at the Meridian for 4 years, and in 4 years, she had learned 3 things that kept her alive. The first was that you never asked a patient their last name. The second was that you never looked too long at the cars parked in the backlot after midnight. The third, and most important, was that you kept your hands busy and your emotions somewhere else entirely, somewhere small and locked and very far from the table in front of you. The Meridian was not a hospital in any traditional sense. It sat tucked behind a dry cleaning shop on the west side of Chicago, unmarked except for a small brass number beside a steel door. Cash only. No insurance. No incident reports filed with any city authority that Destiny had ever been able to find. The patients who came through that steel door were politicians with things to hide, men whose names existed only in sealed federal files, women in designer coats who paid in stacks of bills held together with rubber bands. Destiny didn't ask. She fixed. She went home. She came back and did again. She had grown up in Roseland, which meant she had grown up understanding that the world had 2 layers, the one people talked about and the one people actually lived in. She put herself through nursing school on 2 jobs and a scholarship she applied for 17 times before she got it. And when the Meridian made her an offer that was 3 times what any legitimate hospital would pay, she took it with both hands and told herself that medicine was medicine regardless of who was bleeding. She was good at it. She was exceptional at it. And she was almost always able to leave it at the door when her shift ended. The night CO Jun Kong arrived. 3 men carried him through the back entrance at 2 in the morning. No name, just a black card pressed into the receptionist's hand. Matte, heavy, embossed with a single gold character that Destiny didn't recognize. She didn't need to. She was already counting. 3 exit wounds. The kind of damage that happened when bullets passed clean through and took pieces of things with them on the way out. His blood pressure was non-existent. His pulse was a memory. His body was already doing the quiet, systematic work of shutting itself down, the kind of organized surrender that Destiny had seen enough times to recognize as final. She looked at him for exactly 1 second. The tattoos that covered nearly every inch of his torso were elaborate and layered, the kind of ink that took years and told stories she was never meant to read. His face, even slack and gray with blood loss, had a structure to it, angular, severe, that suggested a man who had spent his entire life being looked at and had learned to look back harder. Destiny snapped on her gloves and got to work. The procedure she used was not in any standard manual. It was the kind of call that existed in the gray space between battlefield medicine and institutional violation, the kind of call that would have ended her career in any building with oversight. She opened his chest cavity manually to relieve the cardiac tamponade that was preventing his heart from beating, blood pooling in the pericardial sac like a closed fist squeezing the life out of him from the inside. Her hands went into his chest. The room was very quiet. Her team moved around her with the precision of people who had learned not to react. She felt the moment his heart kicked. One beat, reluctant, sluggish, like something dragged back from a very long distance. Then another. Then a third, stronger, as if whatever was inside this man had decided that leaving was in fact not acceptable. Destiny stepped back. She stripped off the outer layer of her gloves. She asked for a suture tray in a voice that was completely level, and she told herself that the trembling in her hands was just adrenaline, just the chemical tax the body charges for keeping you functional under pressure, and that it meant absolutely nothing. Then his hand closed around her wrist. His eyes, when they opened, were not the eyes of a man who had just returned from the edge of death. They were the eyes of a man who had been somewhere and come back with information. Dark, bloodshot at the edges, and fixed on her face with an attention so complete it felt like being pinned. The 6 men at the glass doors bowed. Destiny looked at the bruise already forming on her wrist, purple dark and precise as a signature, and understood, not intellectually, not clinically, but somewhere older and more animal than either of those things, that the building she had worked in safely for 4 years had just become something else. She finished her notes. She clocked out at 4 a.m. She drove home on the empty highway with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, and she told herself, firmly and with great conviction, that tomorrow would be ordinary. She was wrong about that. CO June recovered in 48 hours. Not gradually, not incrementally. He recovered the way a system reboots after a forced shutdown, all at once and without apparent effort. Destiny noted it in his chart with clinical language that did not remotely capture what it felt like to walk into a room and find a man sitting upright who should have been horizontal for at least 2 weeks. He was looking at the window when she entered. He turned when she came in, and the way he turned, unhurried, precise, suggested that he had already known she was there. Your oxygen levels are better, Destiny said, because medicine was the only language she was willing to speak with him. Your pressure is still lower than I'd like. You need another 24 hours minimum before I can clear you. Then I'll take another 24 hours, CO June said. His voice, stripped of the death rattle rasp it had carried the night she brought him back, was low and even, accented faintly in a way she couldn't immediately place. He spoke like a man who had learned English as a 3rd or 4th language and had since become better at it than most native speakers. You don't have a choice in that, Destiny said. No, he agreed. I don't. He looked at her for a moment. You have small hand for someone who opened a man's chest. Destiny met his eyes. Hands don't have to be big to do the job. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, not exactly, but the precursor to one, like a door opening a single inch. No, he said again, softer this time. I suppose they don't. She left before that door could open any wider. But she thought about on the drive home, and she didn't like that she did. 72 hours after Seojun Kong was discharged from the Meridian, the building changed ownership. Destiny found out the way she found out most things she wasn't supposed to know, by being in the wrong hallway at the right time. The clinic director, a careful, gray-haired man named Dr. Elias Voss, who had survived 17 years in this building by being professionally incurious about everything, called her into his office at 7 in the morning before her shift began. He was sitting behind his desk with the posture of a man who had already accepted something he couldn't change. There was a document in front of him. He slid it across the desk without speaking. Destiny read it once. Then she read it again, more slowly, the way you reread something when your brain refuses to process it the first time. The Meridian Group LLC had been acquired, effective immediately, by a holding company called Giancio Capital. The terms of acquisition included all existing staff contracts with one addendum, handwritten in clean block letters at the bottom of the final page and initialed in ink so dark it looked almost black. The addendum read, "The employment of Destiny Reed, RN, is considered a condition of this acquisition. Her contract is hereby made indefinite and non-negotiable by either party." Destiny set the document down. She looked at Dr. Voss. He looked back at her with eyes that said he was deeply sorry and also completely unwilling to die on this hill. "Who signed this?" she asked. "The acquiring party," Voss said carefully. "I need a name, Elias." He was quiet for a moment that lasted much longer than a moment. Then he said, "Seo Jun Kong." Destiny sat very still. Outside the office window, the morning shift was beginning. Nurses pulling on gloves, monitors warming up, the ordinary machinery of a place that healed people humming to life. She had been part of that machinery for 4 years. She had been a gear, reliable and replaceable, and that had felt like safety. She understood now that the machine had always had an owner. It just had a different one this morning. "I want to speak to legal," she said. "Our legal team has been restructured," Voss said. He couldn't quite meet her eyes. "As of this morning." Destiny stood up. She straightened her scrubs. She walked out of the office, down the hallway, past the 2 men she had never seen before who were standing outside the trauma suite door in dark suits with the particular stillness of people trained to wait indefinitely. And she went to her station, and she started her shift because there was nothing else to do, and because stopping would mean acknowledging how completely the floor had just dropped out from under her. He came back 4 days later. She was in the middle of charting when the receptionist, a new one, she noticed, the previous one having apparently been part of the restructuring, appeared at her elbow and said, with the careful neutrality of someone reading from script, "Mr. Kong is here for his follow-up." Destiny set down her pen. She took one breath. Then she walked to exam room 3, where Seo Jun was sitting in the chair beside the table rather than on it, as if the distinction were important to him. He was wearing a charcoal suit with no tie. His hands were folded in his lap. He looked, Destiny thought, like a man who had never been sick a day in his life and found the memory of it faintly amusing. On the table beside him were orchids, 27 of them, arranged in a low glass vase with the precision of something that had been thought about for a very long time. "Your follow-up wasn't scheduled," Destiny said, stopping in the doorway. "I scheduled it," Seo Jun said. "That's not how follow-ups work." "It is now." He glanced at the orchids. 27 minutes. "That's how long you worked on me before my heart responded." "I counted afterward from the nurse's notes." He looked back at her. "I wanted you to know that I counted." Destiny looked at the orchids. They were white, which she might have found beautiful under any other circumstance. "This is inappropriate," she said. "Yes," he agreed easily. "I want you to remove your men from my hallway. They're there for your protection." "I don't need protection." "You do," he said, and there was nothing threatening in his tone, which somehow made it worse. It was the voice of a man stating a fact about weather. "You saved the life of Seo Jun Kong. There are people in this city, in several cities, who will view that as a provocation. My men in your hallway are a courtesy." "Taking over my place of employment is not a courtesy," Destiny said. Her voice was level. She was proud of how level it was. Seo Jun tilted his head. The movement was bird-like, precise, and it reminded her uncomfortably of the way he had looked at her in the trauma suite, like she was something he was figuring out. "I needed to ensure your continued availability," he said. "This was the most efficient method. I could call the police." Something moved through his eyes, not amusement, not quite, but something adjacent to it. "The Meridian," he said gently, "has never in its operational history involved outside law enforcement. I suspect you know that. I suspect it's one of the reasons you chose to work here." The worst part was that he was right. Destiny had chosen this building precisely because of its sealed-off nature, its self-contained world, the way it existed outside the ordinary systems of accountability. She had thought that made her freer. She understood now that it had made her accessible. A person inside a closed system has no outside to run to. Get your follow-up, she said finally, crossing to the table and pulling on her gloves. And then I want you out of this building. Of course, Seojun said, standing and moving to the table with the cooperative ease of a man who had already won and could afford to be gracious about it. She checked his wounds. They were healing at a rate she had no clinical framework for. The chest incision that should have been raw and angry was already pulling together, the tissue regenerating with an efficiency that defied the standard timeline she had learned in school. She pressed along the sutured edges, and he didn't flinch, not once, though she knew it had to hurt. Does that hurt? She asked because she needed data. Yes, he said. You're not reacting. I learned a long time ago, Seojun said, looking at the ceiling, that reacting to pain gives it more power than it deserves. Destiny said nothing. She finished her assessment and stripped off her gloves and told him his healing was progressing adequately. He thanked her in a way that somehow managed to feel like a promise rather than a pleasantry. He left. His men did not leave. The orchid stayed on the table in exam room 3 for the rest of the week because no one seemed willing to touch them. The next 2 weeks taught Destiny the shape of the cage. It happened incrementally, the way all the most effective traps work. Not all at once, but in small adjustments so gradual that you didn't register any single one as catastrophic. A patient she turned away for suspected gang ties was quietly redirected by a man at the front desk she didn't recognize. The orderly who had worked her floor for 3 years, a cheerful man named Darius who brought terrible coffee and excellent gossip, was replaced without announcement by a silent, broad-shouldered stranger who performed his duties efficiently and never made eye contact. Her parking garage, which she had always found comfortingly mundane, now had a black car parked directly beside hers every single night. Engine cold, no plates she could trace. Seojun sent food on Tuesdays and Thursdays, her shift days, a detail she had never shared with anyone at the clinic. Korean food from a restaurant in Andersonville she had eaten at exactly once, 18 months ago, on a Sunday afternoon when she had been in that neighborhood for a farmer's market and ducked in out of the rain. Her order that day, sundabujigi, extra firm tofu, no mushrooms, arrived at her station in a sealed container with no note at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Destiny stared at it for a long time. She had told no one about that meal. She had paid cash. She had never gone back. She started leaving the lights on at home. She also started paying attention in a different way. Not the clinical attention she applied to wounds and vitals, but the sharper, more animal attention of someone mapping terrain they might need to navigate quickly. She noticed which of Seojun's men communicated with each other and which operated independently. She noticed the rotation schedule, 3 shifts of 2, 12 hours each. She noticed that the man on the overnight shift outside her floor had a habit of checking his phone at 2 a.m., a 30-second window of distraction that occurred with the reliability of clockwork. She told herself she was gathering information for an exit strategy. But she was also, in ways she wasn't fully ready to examine, beginning to understand the structure of the world she had been absorbed into. And understanding a world, even against your will, is always the first step toward being able to move through it. Seojun came back 6 weeks after the resurrection. Not for a follow-up this time. He was carried in at 11 p.m. on a Friday with a gunshot wound to the right shoulder. Clean entry, clean exit, the bullet having passed through without hitting anything that would kill him. Destiny treated it in 14 minutes. He watched her the entire time with those dark, unreadable eyes, tracking her hands with an attention that felt less like medical anxiety and more like documentation. Does anyone know where you are right now? Destiny asked, cutting away his sleeve. My man, he said. Besides them. No. So whoever shot you doesn't know you're here. They know I'm somewhere being tended to. They don't know where. He paused. They won't try again tonight. How do you know? Because, Seojun said, in that same weather report tone, trying again tonight would be inefficient. They'll wait until they have better positioning. He watched her hands work. You're very fast. I've had practice, Destiny said. On men like me? She looked up at him then, directly, which she had been avoiding. Up close, with the fluorescent light overhead, and his face open in a way it usually wasn't. Pain doing what pain does, stripping the performance away. She could see things she hadn't let herself see before. The exhaustion behind his eyes. The way his jaw was set, not against the pain of the wound, but against something older and heavier. The name tattooed in small, precise characters across his collarbone, half hidden by his torn shirt collar. A woman's name, she thought, though she didn't ask. On people who come in here thinking they're invincible, she said instead, and went back to the sutures. He was quiet for a moment. Then, am I wrong? You had no pulse for 27 minutes, Destiny said. So yes, you're wrong. Another silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. You sound almost sorry you fixed that. Destiny tied off the last suture. She pressed a clean dressing over the wound with more force than was strictly necessary. I'm a nurse, she said. I don't get to be sorry about keeping people alive. That's the job. Seo Jun looked at her for a long moment. What a terrible rule, he said softly. She didn't have an answer for that. She left the room, and she stood in the hallway for 30 seconds with her back against the wall and her eyes closed, and she told herself, firmly, clinically, with all the professional detachment she had spent 4 years building, that the man in that room was a patient and nothing more. Her hands had stopped trembling. She didn't know when that had happened. The third time Seo Jun came in, Destiny knew before she even looked at the wound. It was a knife wound, left side, shallow, the kind of cut that looked dramatic but missed everything vital by a margin too precise to be accidental. She had seen enough trauma in 4 years to know the difference between a wound someone received and a wound someone allowed. She cleaned it without speaking, her jaw tight, her movements efficient and mechanical, and when she was done, she stripped off her gloves and placed them on the tray and stood at the counter with her back to him for a long moment before she spoke. Pull up your chart, she said to the monitor on the wall. I don't think that's necessary, Seo Jun said. Ido. She pulled it up herself. 3 visits in 6 weeks. Entry angles, wound depths, anatomical locations. She read through them the way she would read a sentence, looking for the structure underneath the surface. And there it was. Every wound on the left side of his body, away from the major vessels, deep enough to require treatment, but not deep enough to threaten anything essential. The shoulder shot had been through and through with no arterial involvement. The knife wound tonight had missed his spleen by 4 centimeters, far enough to be safe, close enough to be serious. These were not the wounds of a man being attacked. These were the wounds of a man making deliberate, controlled decisions about his own body with the cold precision of someone who understood anatomy. Destiny turned around. Seo Jun was already watching her. He was sitting on the edge of the table, shirt open, the fresh bandage white against the tattoos covering his ribs. He looked, she thought, almost calm, the way a person looks when they've been caught doing something they were prepared to be caught doing. You did this to yourself, she said. Not a question. He didn't deny it. He held her gaze with an evenness that should have felt like arrogance, but landed somewhere closer to honesty. Yes, he said. Why? It wasn't a question either. It was a demand, flat and non-negotiable. The voice she used when a patient was lying about their symptoms, and she needed the truth before she could help them. He seemed to recognize it as such. Seo Jun looked at his hands for a moment. The tattooed knuckles, the long fingers that she had watched remain perfectly still through procedures that would have had most people white-knuckling the table. Then he looked back up. The 40 minutes, he said, from when I arrive to when you finish. Those are the only 40 minutes in my life when my mind is completely quiet. He paused, as if testing the weight of what he was about to say next. I run an organization that operates in 6 cities across 3 countries. I have made decisions that ended lives and decisions that saved them, and I have learned to hold all of those things without putting them down, because putting them down means they become visible to the people around me, and visible means vulnerable. Another pause. For 40 minutes, when I am on your table, none of that exists. There's only the work you're doing and the sound of your voice, and the particular way you press 2 fingers to a pulse point to check if something is still beating. The room was very quiet. Destiny was aware of the monitor humming, the distant sound of the building settling, the tight, controlled rhythm of her own breathing. "That is not a reason to hurt yourself," she said. "No," Seo Jun agreed. "It isn't. I'm not your therapist. I'm not your comfort. I'm not your—" She stopped, searching for the word. "Yours," he said quietly, finishing the sentence in a direction she hadn't intended. "I know you're not mine. I know what I am to you. A patient. A problem. A man who bought your building and sends food you didn't ask for." He tilted his head. "I know all of that." "Then stop," Destiny said. "I've tried," Seo Jun said simply. And the way he said it, without self-pity, without drama, just the flat acknowledgement of a fact he found inconvenient, was somehow the most unsettling thing he had ever said to her. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, because she had to, because the alternative was pretending she hadn't heard the implication, "If this continues, you are going to do real damage. Not 4 centimeters from something critical. You're going to miscalculate. I know, and if you miscalculate, I may not be able to bring you back." Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. She had decided by now that Seo Jun Kong did not experience fear in any conventional sense, but something adjacent to it. A recognition. "I know that too," he said. Destiny crossed her arms. She looked at him with the full weight of everything she knew about bodies and damage, and the particular arrogance of people who believe they could control the terms of their own destruction. "Then I need you to hear what I'm about to say very clearly," she said, "because I'm going to say it once." Seo Jun went very still. He had the quality she had noticed of becoming more present when she spoke rather than less, as if her words landed somewhere in him and stayed. "If you come into this building one more time with a self-inflicted wound," Destiny said, "I will treat it, because that is my job and I don't get to choose otherwise. But I will also document it in full clinical detail, and I will flag it for psychological review, and whatever happens after that is out of my hands." She paused. "Do you understand me?" Seo Jun was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You would flag it knowing that any outside review of this clinic would expose every patient who has ever come through that door." "Yes," Destiny said. He looked at her, and for the first time since she had pulled him back from the edge of whatever waited on the other side, something in his expression shifted, moved, in a direction she couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't admiration exactly. It was something that sat between those two things and burned with its own particular heat. "You're threatening me," he said. "I'm giving you information," she said. "What you do with it is your choice." Another silence. Then, very quietly, "No one speaks to me this way." "I'm not no one," Destiny said. "I'm a nurse who put her hands inside your chest. Now, get off my table." She left the room before she could see his expression change. But she heard it, heard the soft exhale behind her, slow and controlled, and something underneath it that sounded almost like a man deciding something he'd been undecided about for a very long time. He didn't come back for 11 days. Destiny noticed. She told herself she was monitoring a patient with a concerning behavioral pattern, which was true. She told herself the noticing was clinical, which was less true with every passing day. On day 4, she caught herself checking the intake log before her shift started. On day 7, she asked the night receptionist, the new, silent one, whether anyone had come in after midnight, and the way the receptionist's eyes flickered told her that the question had already been reported to someone before she finished asking it. On day 9, a box arrived at her station. No note. Inside were 2 things: a sealed container of sundabajigi from the Andersonville restaurant and a small glass bottle of siki, the sweet Korean rice drink she had looked up after his second visit, when she had started paying attention to the details of him the way she paid attention to symptoms. She had read that it was traditional, soothing, the kind of thing Korean mothers made for children with fevers. She had wondered, sitting in her apartment at midnight with her phone in her hand, who had made it for him when he was young. She drank the siki at her station and told herself it didn't mean anything. It was sweet and cold and tasted like something she didn't have a word for. On day 11, he walked through the front door under his own power for the first time. No men carrying him. No blood. He was wearing a dark coat over a black shirt, and he looked, from a distance, like any other person in the world, the kind of person you might pass on the street without registering. Up close, he was something else entirely, but from a distance, the ordinary disguise held. Destiny was at the nursing station when he arrived. She looked up. He stopped in front of her and looked back. "I'm not injured," he said. "I can see that," she said. "I want to talk." "This isn't a talking facility." "I know what this facility is," Seo Jun said, and there was something tired in his voice, not the tiredness of sleep deprivation, but the deeper kind, the kind that accumulates over years of being a certain kind of person in a certain kind of world. "I'd like to use one of the consultation rooms." 10 minutes. Destiny should have said no. She was aware, with complete clarity, that saying yes was a mistake of the kind that compounded over time. She said yes anyway, because she had been paying attention for 11 days to the question of who this man was underneath the organization and the orchids and the tattooed thread of him. And the answer was beginning to feel like something she needed to understand in order to survive. They sat across from each other in consultation room 2, small, white, a table between them like a neutral border. Seo Jun folded his hands on the table. He looked at her directly, which she had learned was his default, that unbroken attention he gave everything. "I want to propose something," he said. "No," Destiny said. "You don't know what it is." "It doesn't matter what it is." "It does," he said. "I want to propose that you speak to me. During treatments, during visits. Ask me questions. Keep me," he paused, as if the word he needed wasn't one he used often, present, grounded, in the room. He looked at his hands briefly, then back up. "I believe it would reduce the frequency of the incidents." Destiny stared at him. "You want me to talk to you, so you stop engineering near-death experiences?" "Yes. That is the most deeply troubling thing anyone has ever said to me in a professional context." "I know," Seo Jun said. "I am asking anyway." She looked at him for a long time. The consultation room hummed with the quiet of a sealed space. Outside the door, the clinic moved through its ordinary rhythms, and Destiny sat inside this extraordinary stillness with a man who had bought the building she worked in and sent her food and was now asking her to be his anchor to the living world. And she understood, with a clarity that frightened her precisely because of how clear it was, that she had already started doing it without being asked. The talking during treatments, the questions, the way she had begun to time her words to the rhythm of his breathing when she worked on him, steadying them both. She had already been keeping him present. She just hadn't admitted it. 10 minutes per visit, she said finally. Clinical context only. And you stop hurting yourself. Seo Jun hit his gaze. Agreed, he said. He kept the agreement for exactly 11 days. Destiny kept it for less than 3. The conversation started as transactions and became something else so gradually that Destiny couldn't identify the exact moment the shift occurred. It happened in the small spaces, the pauses between clinical questions, the silences she stopped rushing to fill, the moments when she would ask something about his diet or his sleep patterns, and he would answer with a precision that went further than the question required, as if he had been storing information for a long time, and she was the first person he trusted to receive it accurately. She learned that he slept 4 hours a night, not from insomnia, but from choice, that he had trained himself down from 8 over the course of a decade, because he believed that consciousness was a resource and sleep was a tax he resented paying. She learned that he had come to Chicago from Seoul at 19 with 2 bags and a debt he had spent the next 15 years repaying in ways he described without detail, but with a weight that told her the details were not ones she was ready to hold. She learned that he had 3 younger sisters, all of whom believed he worked in international finance, all of whom he called every Sunday morning at 7 regardless of where he was or what the previous night had involved. Do they know? Destiny asked one evening, seated across from him in consultation room 2 with a chart she was pretending to review. They know I am not in finance, Seo Jun said. They have chosen not to know more than that. He paused. It is a kindness we extend to each other. That sounds lonely, Destiny said, before she could stop herself. He looked at her. Not with surprise. She had noticed that very little surprised him, but with something that looked like being seen, the particular vulnerability of a person who has been accurately perceived. It is, he said simply. She looked back at her chart. The conversation moved on. But the words stayed in the room between them, small and honest and more dangerous than anything else he had ever said to her. She learned about the sea key on the 4th week of conversations. She mentioned, offhandedly, that she had received the bottle he sent and that she had researched the drink afterward. He was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother made it," he said. "When I was sick as a child, she would sit outside my door while I slept, and I could hear her moving, the particular sound of her slippers on the floor, and I knew that the world was still organized in the right order." He looked at his hands. "I haven't thought about that in a long time." Destiny set down her pen. "Why did you send it to me?" Co. June considered the question with the seriousness he gave everything. "Because you look tired," he said finally, "and I thought you might need something that tasted like someone was paying attention." The room was very quiet. Destiny was aware of the particular quality of the silence, the kind that has weight, that means something has been said that cannot be unsaid. She looked at the man across the table, the man who had bought her building and threatened her livelihood and arranged her world around himself without asking. And she felt, alongside all the anger and fear and professional outrage, she was fully entitled to something else, something warm and inconvenient that she pressed down firmly and covered with the clean cloth of professional distance. "That was," she said carefully, "unexpectedly kind." "I'm occasionally kind," Co. June said, "when the situation permits." "Does the situation often permit it?" "Less and less," he said. "Until recently." She went home that night and sat in her kitchen for a long time, not moving, staring at the window. The city outside was doing what it always did, living loudly and indifferently, unconcerned with the specific crisis of one woman who was becoming dangerously interested in a man she should have been terrified of. She thought about the tattoo on his collarbone, the woman's name she had never asked about. She thought about 3 younger sisters who called him Appa and believed he worked in finance. She thought about a grandmother's slippers on a floor somewhere in Seoul, and a sick child listening for the sound of someone who cared enough to stay. She thought, "I am in serious trouble." She went back to work the next morning. The problem with learning someone's architecture is that it changes the way you move around them. Destiny had started the conversations as intelligence gathering, mapping Co. June's patterns the way she would map a difficult patient's responses, looking for leverage and predictability and the specific points of pressure that might give her room to maneuver. She was still doing that, but she was also, simultaneously and against her better judgment, simply listening, absorbing, building without meaning to a detailed and tender understanding of who this man was under everything he had made himself into. She knew his tells now. The way his jaw tightened fractionally when he was lying, not to her, but in his recounting of events, a micro-expression she had started to watch for the way she watched vitals as data. The way he became very still when he was genuinely interested in something, as opposed to his performed stillness, which was slightly too perfect. The way he touched the name on his collarbone, sometimes without seeming to realize he was doing it, a small, unconscious gesture that told her the name belonged to someone whose absence was still present. She asked, finally, on a Tuesday evening when the clinic was quiet and the light in the consultation room was doing something golden and forgiving. "The name on your collarbone," she said. Co. June's hand moved to his collar, then stopped. He looked at her. "My mother," he said. Destiny absorbed this. "She's gone." "Yes. No elaboración. No performance of grief. Just the flat, clean acknowledgement of something that had been true for long enough that he had learned to carry it without showing the weight." "I'm sorry," Destiny said. He looked at her for a moment. "You say that like you mean it." "I do mean it. Most people say it like a password," he said. "Something you produce to move past an uncomfortable moment." He tilted his head. "You say it like you've lost someone too." Destiny was quiet. "Then, my mother. 7 years ago." She paused. "She was a nurse. That's why I became one." Something moved through Co. June's expression, a softness so brief she almost missed it, there and gone like a light through a closing door. "Then she's in every person you save," he said. Destiny looked at her hands. She thought about her mother's hands, broader than hers, always warm, always moving, making food, folding laundry, pressing a cool cloth to a forehead. hands that had worked in a neighborhood clinic in Roseland for 30 years and had never once, as far as Destiny knew, questioned whether the work was worth it. "Yes," she said, very quietly. "I think she is." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Not the weighted, dangerous quiet of two people circling each other, but something more open, more mutual. The silence of two people who have, without planning to, shown each other something real. Seo Jun broke it first. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay," Destiny said. "The men outside the GMPA, my organization, have been watching this clinic more closely than usual for the past 2 weeks. There are people within the syndicate who have begun to view my," he paused, choosing the word carefully, "investment in this facility as a liability." Destiny went still. "Investment," she said. "You," he said. "They view you as a liability." She looked at him. The warmth of the previous minutes had not disappeared, but it had reorganized itself around something colder and sharper. "Are you telling me I'm in danger?" "I'm telling you I am managing it," Seo Jun said. "But I want you to know because—" Another pause, longer this time, as if the sentence required construction he wasn't practiced at, "because you deserve to know the shape of your situation, even if I am the one who created it." Destiny sat with that for a moment. The honesty of it. The strange, complicated honor of a man who had trapped her, telling her exactly how the trap was built. "What does managing it look like?" she asked. "Additional rotation on your floor. A car outside your building at night. I believe you've noticed it." "I noticed it 3 weeks ago." "I know," he said. "I had it moved closer when you changed your route home. You take the long way on Wednesdays now." Destiny stared at him. The particular chill of being known without permission moved through her, cold and specific, like a key turning in a lock. "You know my route. I know everything about your movements that my men can observe," Seo Jun said. "Not because I want to surveil you. Because I need to protect you, and protection requires information." He met her eyes steadily. "I understand that distinction may not feel meaningful from where you're sitting." "It doesn't," Destiny said. "No," he said. "I thought not." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Destiny. For all of it. The building, the contract, the car outside your home." He stopped. "I could tell you I had no other options, but that would be a lie. I had other options. I chose the ones that ensured you couldn't leave." The room was very quiet. Destiny looked at the man across the table. This impossible, dangerous, complicated man who had walked back from the dead and taken her world hostage and was now sitting across from her in a small white room, apologizing with the careful sincerity of someone who did not do it often and meant it completely. She wanted to be furious. She was furious. She was also, and this was the part she couldn't rationalize away, moved. In the specific way you are moved when someone dangerous chooses honesty over self-protection. When a person who has every reason to keep their armor on decides to put it down in front of you. "If I asked you to let me go," she said, "right now, to cancel the contract and remove your men and walk out of this building and leave me alone, would you?" Seo Jun was quiet for a very long time. She watched his face and saw the war in it. Not performed, not calculated, but real. The genuine conflict of a man who wanted two things that could not coexist. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I could." "Because of the obsession," she said. "Because of the danger," he said. "If I withdraw my protection now, with the GMPA watching, you become a message they can send me. A way to demonstrate that I have a weakness." He paused. "And because of the obsession," he added quietly. "Both things are true." Destiny stood up. She straightened her scrubs. She looked at him one more time, long enough to memorize the expression on his face, which was the expression of a man who had told the truth and was waiting to see what the truth cost him. "Then we're going to need a different arrangement," she said, "because I will not spend my life being managed. Not by a syndicate and not by you." She left before he could respond. But as she walked down the hallway, back toward the ordinary world of monitors and charts, and the reliable work of keeping people alive, she heard him say something behind her, low, quiet, not quite directed at her, more like a man speaking to himself. "No," he said, "you won't." And somehow that was the most frightening thing he had ever said, because it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a beginning. 3 days later, the Jianpa made their move. The lockdown came on a Wednesday at 11 p.m., which was the middle of Destiny's shift and the quietest hour in the building. The window between the last evening admissions and the first early morning emergencies, when the clinic exhaled and the staff moved slower and the hallways held a particular kind of institutional peace that Destiny had always found steadying. She was at the nursing station charting when the lights changed. Not off, just different. The emergency system kicking in, the overheads dropping to half power, and the red auxiliary strips along the floor baseboards warming to life. The electronic locks on the external doors engaged with a sound like a building swallowing, a deep, resonant thunk that she felt in her sternum more than she heard with her ears. The receptionist looked up. The two men in the hallway, CO June's rotation, the overnight pair she had cataloged 3 weeks ago, went rigid and reached simultaneously into their jackets. Destiny stood up slowly. "What is this?" she asked the nearer of the two men. His name, she had learned, was Park. He was the one who checked his phone at 2 a.m. Right now, he was not checking his phone. He was speaking rapidly and quietly into an earpiece, his eyes moving across the hallway with the systematic sweep of someone conducting a threat assessment. "Stay at the station," he said to her, without looking at her directly. "That is not an answer," Destiny said. "Ms. Reed." He looked at her now, and the look was serious in a way that reached past professional into something more personal. The look of a person delivering information they wish they didn't have. "Please stay at the station." Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A message from a number she didn't recognize, but the cadence of the sentences was immediately, unmistakably familiar. "Stay where you are. Do not go to the exits. I am coming to you. Do not open any door until you hear my voice. SJK." Destiny read it twice. Then she looked up at Park, who was still sweeping the hallway, and at the other man, whose name she didn't know, who had started moving toward the south corridor with his hand no longer inside his jacket. And she felt something she had not felt in all her weeks of mapping and cataloging and pressing down her fear into usable data. She felt genuinely, purely afraid. Not of CO June. Of what was coming through the door he was apparently trying to get between her and. She stayed at the station. She pulled on gloves, an instinct so automatic she didn't register doing it until she looked down at her hands and found them blue nitrile covered. She looked at the trauma suite, at the supply cabinets she knew by heart, at the layout of the hallway she could have navigated blindfolded after 4 years of walking it. She thought about exits. She thought about the service corridor behind the laundry room that connected to the east stairwell, the one Darius the orderly had shown her in her first week, because he said every nurse should know their second way out. She thought, "I know this building better than anyone coming into it from outside." The first sound was glass. A window in the west corridor. Not an external window, an interior partition, breaking in the specific way safety glass breaks. Not shattering, but collapsing inward in a cascade of rounded fragments. Then footsteps, more than 2 pairs, moving with the purposeful quiet of people who had practiced this specific approach in a specific building. Park's voice came sharp and low from somewhere down the hallway. 4. Service entrance. Moving east. Then the sound of something that Destiny's brain tried to categorize as something other than what it was, and failed. A shot. Suppressed, but not silent. A flat, business-like sound, nothing like the dramatic crack of television violence. More like a book being dropped on a hard floor. Then another. Then silence. Then CO June's voice, somewhere in the west corridor, saying something in Korean that she didn't understand, but that carried the specific frequency of a command. Destiny made a decision. She moved. Not to the exit. She wasn't suicidal. She moved to the trauma supply cabinet behind the nursing station, the one she had restocked that morning and therefore knew exactly. She took a surgical kit. She took 2 units of O-negative from the mini fridge under the counter. She took the crash cart key from its hook and wheeled the cart 6 feet to the left, behind the station desk, out of the direct sight line of the west corridor entrance. She thought about what she knew. She thought about bodies, the bodies of people who wanted to hurt her, which were the same as the bodies of anyone else, organized around the same vulnerable geography, subject to the same physical laws. She knew where the femoral artery ran. She knew the brachial. She knew the specific pressure required to compress the carotid and the number of seconds before consciousness became unreliable. She had spent 4 years learning how to prevent those outcomes. The knowledge did not stop being knowledge when you needed it to work in the other direction. She was not going to be a victim inside her own building. She refused. The door at the end of the hallway opened. A man came through it, tall, dark coat, someone she had never seen before, moving with the controlled urgency of a professional who had found an obstruction between himself and his objective. He saw her immediately. He stopped. Destiny stood behind the nursing station with a crash cart between them and a surgical kit on the counter beside her right hand, and she looked at him with the same face she used for patients who came in aggressive and frightened and needed to understand immediately that she was not going to be the variable that gave them control. "This is a medical facility," she said. Her voice was level. She was proud, again, of how level it was. "Whatever you're here for, I'm going to ask you to reconsider." The man looked at her with the particular expression of someone reassessing a situation they thought was simple. Then he took a step forward. The door behind him opened again. Seo Jun came through it like a weather system. Not fast, but with the kind of mass and intention that changes the pressure of a room. He was bleeding from a cut above his left eye, the blood tracking down his cheekbone in a dark line that he had not paused to address. His suit jacket was gone. His expression was the most stripped down she had ever seen it. All the controlled performance gone, leaving something underneath that was older and sharper and not remotely safe. He said one word in Korean. The man between them went very still. Then Seo Jun said, in English, without taking his eyes off the man, "Destiny, move to the trauma suite. Lock the interior door." "No," Destiny said. A pause. "This is not a conversation. You're bleeding from your head," she said, "which means you've already taken at least one hit tonight and your situational awareness is compromised. I'm not locking myself in a room and leaving you out here with impaired judgment." Seo Jun looked at her then, a quick, sharp glance across the space between them. Something moved through his face. Not the awe she would see later. Something more immediate. Recognition. The particular expression of a man who has just realized, with complete certainty, that the person he is looking at is not what he originally assessed. Then the man in the dark coat moved. What happened in the next 4 minutes Destiny would spend a long time afterward trying to organize into a linear sequence, because it didn't happen linearly. It happened in the compressed, non-chronological way of moments where the body moves faster than the mind can record. She knew she moved left. She knew the crash cart went right into the corridor, creating an obstacle that bought 3 seconds. She knew she used those 3 seconds to get to the south end of the nursing station where the angle gave her a sightline Seo Jun didn't have. She knew that there were 4 of them in total, not 1, because Park had said 4 and Park had been right, and the other 3 came through the south corridor door at the same moment. The first one recovered from the crash cart, and Seo Jun engaged him with the focused, economical violence of someone for whom this was not new. She knew that one of the 4 broke away from Seo Jun and came for her directly. She knew he was larger than her and faster than her, and that none of those facts were useful data in the absence of a plan. She had a plan. The brachial nerve cluster sits in the upper arm, medial surface, accessible if you know exactly where to press and with exactly how much force. Destiny knew exactly. She had located it 100 times on 100 patients for 100 legitimate medical reasons. She located it now for a different reason, with the heel of her palm rather than her fingertips, and the result was immediate and anatomically predictable. The man's arm went non-functional from the elbow down, his grip releasing, his body rotating involuntarily away from her. She used the rotation. She put the crash cart between them again. She looked at his leg, the way his weight was distributed, the knees slightly hyperextended on the right side, the old injury she had spotted from his gait when he came through the door. She made a decision she would think about for a long time afterward, the moral weight of it settling into her chest like something she would have to learn to carry. She applied pressure to the right knee with a precise lateral force that had nothing to do with healing. He went down. She looked up. Seo Jun had 2 of the remaining 3 contained. One on the floor, one against the wall with Seo Jun's forearm across his throat. But the fourth was behind him, moving in from the blind side, and Seo Jun didn't see it because of the blood in his left eye and the compromised peripheral vision she had told him about and he hadn't listened to. Left, Destiny said. Loud, clear, no hesitation. Seo Jun moved left. The fourth man's momentum carried him into empty space. Seo Jun turned and finished it with the concentrated efficiency of someone ending a sentence he had started, and then the hallway was very quiet except for the hum of the emergency lighting and the sound of both of them breathing. For men on the floor, the red auxiliary strips along the baseboards casting everything in a color that Destiny's clinical brain noted was exactly the wrong shade for accurate wound assessment. She crossed to Seo Jun immediately. She took his face in both hands. Blue nitrile. She was still wearing gloves. She had put them on at the station out of instinct. And she tilted his head toward the light and looked at the cut above his eye. Superficial. No orbital envolvimento. Bleeding dramatically, the way head wounds always did, but not dangerous. Sit down, she said. I'm fine, Seo Jun said. You have blood in your eye, and you almost got hit from the left because of it, Destiny said. Seat. Down. He sat. On the floor, right there in the hallway, because there was nowhere else, and because she thought he was less able to argue with her right now than he had ever been. She cleaned the wound with supplies from the kit she had staged at the nursing station. Her hands were steady. She noted this with a distant, clinical part of her mind. Her hands had been steady throughout. She didn't know what that meant about her. She wasn't sure she wanted to. Seo Jun sat very still while she worked, which was what he always did. But this time the stillness was different. She could feel it, a different quality of attention. Something changed in the texture of his presence. He was looking at her face while she worked on his, and the look was nothing she had a clinical category for. You told me left, he said quietly. Yes, she said. You didn't run. I told you that wasn't going to happen, Destiny said, pressing a closure strip over the wound with clean, firm pressure. You took down one of them yourself, he said. A man twice your size. Anatomy, she said. It works the same in both directions. Seo Jun was quiet for a moment. She smoothed the closure strip and leaned back to assess it. And when she looked at his face, she found it. The expression she had no name for. Open in a way she had never seen it. The controlled, predatory, perfectly managed surface of Seo Jun Kong, completely absent, and underneath it something that looked startlingly, almost painfully, like wonder. You are not what I thought you were, he said. No, Destiny said. I'm not. Why brought you back? He stopped. Corrected himself. When you brought me back, I believed I understood what you were. A person who healed things. Someone whose power was in the restoration of what was broken. He looked at her. I didn't understand that restoration and survival are the same skill. Destiny sat back on her heels. She looked at him, this bleeding, impossible man on the floor of her hallway, surrounded by the evidence of a war that had come to her building because of him and that she had helped him fight with the same hand she used to save lives. I'm going to need you to be very honest with me right now, she said. Yes, he said. Is this over? Seo Jun hit her gaze. Tonight is over, he said carefully. That's not what I asked. No, he said. It's not over. The GMPA sent 4 men tonight. Next time they will not make the same mistake. Destiny nodded. She had known this. She had known it the way you know things you don't want to know, in the body before the mind catches up. She stood up. She looked down the hallway at the building she had worked in for 4 years, which was going to clean itself the way it always did, quietly and expensively, and by morning would look like nothing had happened here at all. She looked back at Seo Jun. He was still looking at her with that expression, the awe that had replaced possession, the wonder that had replaced obsession, and she thought about what it meant that a man like this, a man who had arranged the world around himself for 20 years, was sitting on her floor looking at her like she was the most surprising thing he had ever encountered. She thought, I'm so far past the point of no return. She thought, I know. She reached down and offered him her hand. Seo Jun looked at her hand for a moment. That offered hand, bare and steady in the red-tinted emergency light, and something crossed his face that she had never seen there before. Not calculation, not the controlled assessment he applied to everything. Just a man, briefly unguarded, looking at something being extended to him that he had stopped believing was available. He took it. She pulled him to his feet. He was heavier than he looked, dense with the particular solidity of a person who had spent years making themselves difficult to move. He stood, and they were close, closer than the clinical distance she had maintained for weeks, closer than the consultation room table had ever allowed. And for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Destiny stepped back. She let go of his hand. She crossed her arms and looked at him with the full weight of everything she had been holding since the night she charged a defibrillator to 300 and felt a dead man's heart kick back to life on her hands. "We need to talk," she said. "Not 10 minutes. Not clinical context only. All of it." CO Jun straightened his shirt. He nodded once. They sat in the trauma suite, the same room where it had begun, the heart monitor in the corner still present, still blinking its quiet green reassurance into the dimmed light. Destiny sat on the stool she used for procedures. CO Jun sat on the table, which felt like an inversion of every previous dynamic between them, and she let that inversion stand because it felt true to where they were. "The Jianpa," she said. "All of it. Start from the beginning." He told her. Not everything. She understood that all of it would take longer than one night and more trust than they had yet fully built, but enough. The structure of the syndicate, its leadership, the specific faction within it that had decided Seo Jun's attachment to the Meridian made him a vulnerability worth excising. The names of the men who had made that decision. The timeline he estimated before they reorganized and tried again. Destiny listened the way she listened to complex patient histories, without interrupting, organizing the information into a structure she could work with, identifying the variables she could affect and the ones she couldn't. "What do they value above everything?" she asked when he finished. Seo Yun looked to her. "Power," he said, "and the appearance of it. The Jianpa operates on a logic of demonstrations. Every action is a message. Every response is a countermessage. So tonight was a message," Destiny said. "Tonight was a test," Seo Jun said, "to see if I would choose the organization over you. If I came back to them and left you unprotected, the threat would have resolved itself. And if you didn't, then they would escalate." He paused. "They have escalated." Destiny was quiet for a moment. She thought about demonstrations. She thought about messages. She thought about the particular logic of a world organized around the performance of power, which was not so different from the world of medicine, another place where perception shaped reality, where confidence was a clinical tool, where the appearance of control sometimes preceded the actual possession of it. "You need to send them a different message," she said. Seo Yun looked at her carefully. "What message?" "That I'm not a vulnerability," Destiny said. "That I'm an asset. That whoever comes for me is going to encounter someone who understands exactly how a body fails and is completely willing to apply that knowledge." She met his eyes. "Tonight happened in your hallway. Next time it needs to happen in their head before they ever get to the door." Seo Jun was very still. That quality of absolute attention he brought to everything was fully present, focused on her face with an intensity that she had stopped flinching away from somewhere in the past few weeks without registering the moment it became comfortable. "You want to become something they factor into the calculation," he said. "I want to stop being a footnote in your war and become a reason people think twice," Destiny said. "I can't shoot anyone. I won't. But information is a weapon, and I have spent 4 years inside a building where half the criminal infrastructure of this city has been repaired. I know things. I know names, faces, the medical histories of men who would pay a great deal to ensure those histories stayed private." Seo Jun looked at her for a long time. "You've been compiling this," he said. It was not a question. "I've been paying attention," Destiny said. "There's a difference." Something moved through his expression, that warmth that he kept carefully managed, that she had started to be able to read past the management. "Yes," he said quietly. "There is." A pause. "You would use this, knowing the risk." "I've been at risk since the night I brought you back," Destiny said. "At least this way I'm at risk on my own terms." The trauma suite was quiet around them. The heart monitor blinked. The emergency lights had normalized back to full power somewhere in the past 20 minutes. The building returned to its ordinary brightness, and in the clean overhead light Destiny could see Seo Jun clearly, The closure strip above his eye, the blood dried on his cheekbone that she had cleaned but that had left a faint trace, the exhaustion underneath the composure that she now knew was structural, years deep. The tiredness of a man who had been carrying the weight of a world he'd built from the wrong materials. "I told you," she said, more quietly now, "on one of the first nights that I'm not yours, that I'm not your doctor or your comfort or your anything." "I remember," Seo-jun said. "I'm changing that," she said. He went very still. "Not the way you imagined it. Not a cage with better furniture. But I'm telling you that I am choosing to be in this, whatever this is, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life being managed by a situation I didn't create, and I would rather be inside at making decisions than outside at having them made for me." Seo-jun looked at her for a long time without speaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful, the voice of a man handling something he was afraid to break. "You understand what choosing this means," he said. "The jianpa, the life, the specific weight of being connected to someone like me. I'm a trauma nurse and no questions asked clinic," Destiny said. "I have been connected to someone like you for 4 years. I just didn't have a name for it." He almost smiled. The almost smile she had cataloged weeks ago, the door opening an inch, opened a little wider. "What changed?" he asked. "You told me the truth," she said simply. "When you didn't have to. When it cost you something." She looked at him. People who tell expensive truths are worth paying attention to. Seo-jun was quiet. Then he said, carefully, like a man reading a map in a language he was still learning, "I don't know how to do this correctly. What you're describing. I have," he paused, "arranged things for a long time. People and resources and situations. I'm very good at arranging. I'm not practiced at asking," Destiny said. "Yes," he said. "Then ask," she said. He looked at her. The heart monitor blinked between them, steady and patient, measuring something. "Will you help me dismantle the faction within the Jianpa that has made you a target?" he said. "With the information you have. On your terms. With full knowledge of the risk and the full right to stop at any point you choose." A pause. "Will you do this with me?" "Not for me." Destiny looked at him for a long moment. She thought about her mother's hands. She thought about the night she had reached into a stranger's chest and felt his heart choose to beat. She thought about orchids and siki and a grandmother's slippers on a floor in Seoul and a man who called his sisters every Sunday morning at 7 regardless of where he had been or what the night had cost him. She thought, "This is not the life I planned." She thought, "It is the one I have." "Yes," she said, "but we're changing the contract." "Whatever you want," Seo-jun said immediately, and she believed him. "I want full access to my own life, my own schedule. The car outside my building stays." She held up a hand as he started to speak. "Because I am not naive, but it stays on my terms. I know when it's there, and I know who's in it, and I have a direct line to that person at all times." She paused. "The orchids can stay too." Something flickered in his eyes. "The orchids? Don't make it a thing," Destiny said. "I'm not making it anything," he said, and there was warmth in his voice now, real and unmanaged, the kind she had heard underneath all the careful construction of him and had never expected to be the reason for. They sat together in the trauma suite for another hour, talking through the architecture of what came next, the information Destiny had, the specific leverage points, the names and histories that could be weaponized not with violence, but with exposure, the particular vulnerability of powerful men who had medical secrets they needed to remain secret. Seo-jun listened with the absolute attention he gave everything, and he contributed with the strategic precision she had come to understand was genuinely exceptional. And somewhere in the middle of that hour, the conversation stopped being a negotiation and became something else. Two people thinking together, the specific intimacy of shared purpose, minds moving in the same direction. At 2 in the morning, Destiny stood up. She looked around the trauma suite, the room where she had first seen him, where she had reached into his chest and made a decision that changed everything. The heart monitor blinked. The room smelled of antiseptic and the faint copper trace of the evening's violence, and underneath both of those things something that she chose not to name but recognized. "Go home," she said to Seo-jun. "Have someone look at that closure strip in the morning. Not here, a different facility. Somewhere they don't know to look for you yet." See you soon. He straightened his shirt again. That gesture she had come to understand as his version of composure restoration, the small physical ritual of putting himself back together. He looked at her. Destiny, he said. Don't, she said. Not tonight. Tonight was enough. He nodded. He moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, and she knew he was going to say something, and she knew she was going to remember whatever it was for a long time. My heart, he said quietly, not looking back. It has beaten on your time since the night you brought it back. I told you that as a warning. A pause. I'm telling you now as something else. He left. The door closed behind him with the soft, definitive sound of a choice being made. Destiny stood alone in the trauma suite. The heart monitor blinked its steady green rhythm into the quiet. Beep, beep, beep. The same sound that had opened that night weeks ago when a dead man grabbed her wrist and told her she should have let him go. She had not let him go. She had chosen, with both hands and full knowledge, to bring him back. And that choice had cost her the ordinary life she had built and the professional distance she had cultivated in the careful, controlled safety of a woman who fixed things and went home and did not allow herself to be affected by what she fixed. She was affected, completely, irreversibly, and on her own terms. She looked at the bruise on her wrist, faded now, almost gone, but still faintly present in the way that certain marks are, the ones that leave an impression in the skin long after the pressure is lifted. She pressed her own fingers to it lightly. It didn't hurt anymore. She turned off the light and went to write her notes. Outside, Chicago moved through its night. Somewhere across the city, a man, with a closure strip above his eye, was being driven home by men who reported to him and calling his sisters in Seoul in 7 hours regardless. Somewhere inside a syndicate that did not yet know it had made the wrong calculation, decisions were being made based on an incomplete picture of what Destiny Reed was capable of. They would find out. She would make sure of it. She was a trauma nurse. She understood, better than most, that survival was not passive. It was the most active thing a body could do, the constant, tireless work of choosing to continue. She had spent 4 years helping other people choose it. It was time, she decided, to choose it loudly for herself. She finished her notes. She clocked out. She walked to the parking garage where the black car sat beside hers, engine cold. She knocked on the window. The man inside startled. She had never approached the car before, and rolled it down. "What's your name?" she asked. He blinked. "Kim," he said carefully. "J1 Kim." "J1," she said. "I want your direct number. And tomorrow I want to know the rotation schedule. All of it, every shift." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not running from this anymore. That means I need to know everything you know. Are we clear?" J1 Kim looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, a recalibration, rapid and visible, as if the file he had been keeping on Destiny Reed had just been updated with information that changed its entire classification. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Destiny nodded. She got in her car. She drove home on the direct route. Not the long way, not the Wednesday detour. With the radio on for the first time in weeks, the city moving around her in its indifferent, luminous way, and her hands steady on the wheel. She left the lights off when she got home. She didn't need them on anymore. There's a lesson buried in this story that has nothing to do with obsession and everything to do with agency. Destiny Reed did not choose the circumstances that found her. She did not choose the man who grabbed her wrist, or the building that changed hands, or the war that came through her door on a Wednesday night. What she chose, consistently, deliberately, and at significant personal cost, was how she moved through all of it. She chose information over ignorance, engagement over retreat. She chose to understand the shape of the thing that had her rather than simply endure it, and that understanding became her most powerful tool. The story also holds something true about the particular danger of being needed. Seo Jun's obsession began as possession, the belief that because she had restored something in him, she belonged to him. It took someone refusing to accept that framing repeatedly and without apology for the obsession to evolve into something that resembled actual respect. Not all obsession becomes respect. Most of it doesn't. But the condition for any transformation is always the same. The person being pursued must remain absolutely and without negotiation themselves. Destiny never stopped being a nurse. She never stopped assessing, cataloging, applying pressure to exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. She used the same skills in the hallway that she used in the trauma suite. And the lesson there is that your core competence, the thing you know how to do better than anything else, is never wasted. It simply finds new applications. NCO June, a man who built a cage around someone he wanted to keep and was surprised to find that the person inside the cage was the most capable person in the room. He learned, painfully and slowly, that protection and possession are not the same thing, and that a person who chooses to stand beside you is infinitely more valuable than one who has no choice but to stay. The heart monitor is still blinking somewhere in that trauma suite. Beep, beep, beep. Every beat a reminder that coming back from the edge is not the remarkable thing. The remarkable thing is what you do once you're back. How you live in the time that was given to you by someone else's stubborn, skilled, unrelenting refusal to let you go. Thank you for staying until the very last word. That is not a small thing. In a world built for short attention and fast scrolling, choosing to sit with a story from beginning to end is an act of genuine commitment. And this story was made for people like you. People who want the full weight of something. People who can hold complexity without flinching. If this story reached something in you, the part that knows what it is to feel trapped, or to want someone to see past what you've made yourself into, or to discover that your most ordinary skill is also your greatest weapon, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. Like this video, leave a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest, and subscribe because the next story is already waiting and it will not disappoint. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the most important thing you can do in any room, in any situation, is remain completely, unapologetically, irreducibly yourself. That is the only cage no one can build around you.